Welcome, everybody, to the Brian Fultus Behavioral Podcast. My name is Dr. Brian Fultus, and I'm an associate professor of finance at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana. And my goal is to teach you about behavioral finance in hopes that you make better decisions in life and with your money. Today's episode is a continuation and a finalization on laying out various heuristics and biases. And when we finish out this episode, we're going to come back and talk about these biases and heuristics through a financial lens, through the lens of financial decision making. And we're going to continue on here. I am recording this podcast in the new house. So since the last time I've recorded podcasts, I moved houses, wrapped up, picked up, and moved into a new office, and I was pleasantly surprised that my fiance, who's over my shoulder there, she surprised me with a new office. So my office no longer looks like a college-aged student's office, but rather a nice actual adult office. So I'm super happy to be here. Feel really fortunate and blessed to be in this new house. And if you hear construction, that's because the neighborhood is filling in around us. And our couple doors down, we call him William Robert. He's building a pool. And so William Robert, people call him Billy Bob for short, but we call him William Robert. They've got trucks and all sorts of stuff going on over there. So anyway, thanks for joining me today and watching today. If you haven't already done so, please make sure you like and subscribe, and we'd love to hear from you about how things are going so far. So today, as we finish our conversation on biases and heuristics, we get to jump into one of my favorite biases and subjects that we're going to talk about. And this topic is actually what Albert Einstein has called the eighth wonder of the world. So compound interest, he calls it the eighth wonder of the world. And Albert Einstein says, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And I found that quote really interesting because I'm in the area of financial literacy and trying to help people learn about finance in order to drive their decision making and make better decisions. Well, there was a paper that came out a number of years ago, and for so many years, financial literacy has always been binary. So there's three questions you have to answer. If you get them right, you're considered financially literate. If you get them wrong, you are considered financially illiterate. And then you make your conclusions that those who are literate make great decisions all the time, and those who are financially illiterate make terrible decisions. Well, what we found out as we started analyzing, we said, okay, let's look at the actual behaviors around financial literacy. So if you become financially literate, do you improve your actual behavior? And so this was Daniel Fernandez. I think he's over in Colorado. I'm not sure where he's at now, but he wrote a paper that analyzed approximately 200 different studies. And his main conclusion was financial literacy is nice, but it only drives 0.1% of improved financial behavior. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so I ended up studying, I said, I want to study financial literacy, but what are some of the things that have the most impact on actual behavior? And what I've found in a lot of my studies is this topic that we're going to talk about. And this is called the exponential growth bias. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question here. And I've got $10,000, and we're going to save that for 40 years. So imagine 22-year-old, 22 again. God bless you. 22-year-old holding this $10,000 for 40 years, and he's going to earn 10% per year on average. So annualized 10% per year. I already have the whiteboard out for you, and my question is, not touching, not depositing, not withdrawing any money, how much money do you think he'll have in 40 years? And so here's what happens. We ask this question, and we think about this intuitively. Now, this is, again, going back to our type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is making the shortcuts, fastest way possible. So fastest way possible for me to think about this is, okay, 40 years, 10%. So I go, okay, that's going to multiply by 4. So maybe $40,000 or $50,000 if I hold on to this for 40 years. And this is our tendency to think in linear terms. So that's a reasonable way to think about it. However, if we understand compound interest, our money doesn't grow in a straight line. Our money grows exponentially as it compounds. So we start at 10,000, and our tendency is to think it goes in a straight line. Like that. But it doesn't. In fact, it starts increasing, and it goes hyperbolic. It's kind of a bad joke. It goes up into the sky. So if you're following finance, you know about finance, you hear it all the time. And my Instagram is, if you do this and if you invest 20,000 at 20 and then it grows to this, and they always post the numbers. And I go, okay, that's good to know, and we're trying to show how things grow. But why don't we just do the math? Can I just teach you how to do the math so then you can run these numbers yourself? That's what I'm going to do. So, and we'll get to the final answer here. All this is future value equals present value times 1 plus our rate of return to the T time power. Right? This is all there is to it. Now, a little math review. Got to go back to math class here. The way you order this is you're going to go 1 plus the return, so it's 1 plus 0.1 to the 40th power. 1 plus 0.1 to the 40th power. So I've got my calculator, 1.1, and then I'm going to hit y to the x power, and then I type in 40. Now I have my number, and I'm going to multiply that by the investment. So 10,000 times 45 equals 452,592, and don't forget the 56 cents. And all you're doing is you're taking 1 plus the return to the how many years power and multiplying it by whatever you have right away. And you'll get $452,592.56. I got to add the 2. Yep. So here's 2 points out of this. First, if we think in linear terms, which is our tendency to do, we're going to think we only got 40 or 50,000 if we hold on to it and invest it for the next 40 years. So if we believe that your $10,000, if we put it in the stock market for the next 40 years, is only going to give us $40,000 or $50,000 back, what do you think we're going to be doing with that money? Are we going to save it or are we going to spend it? Of course. If I only think it's going to grow that much, no, I'm going to consume this now. At least I'll get some pleasure out of it. I'm not going to defer this just for a moderate increase. Well, if I believe, though, and I can circumvent that linear way of thinking and know that if I invest this for 40 years and don't touch it, I'm going to have $452,592.56. Well, I'm going to be more likely to hold it and invest it for longer periods of time and let that compounding be your best friend as time goes on. This is exactly Warren Buffett. He's experiencing this compound. He's Charlie Munger's 96, and Buffett. You can fact check me on this. I want to say 92, but the last 20 or 30 years for them has been significant compounding in their wealth over time. And so that's the simple math behind it. And if you wanted to re-engineer, and once you get that foundation, you can re-engineer it and say, hey, I want to be a millionaire in 20 years, and I believe I can earn 10% per year. Actually, 20 years. What we'll do is we can go present value equals future value divided by the same 1 plus the rate to the t power. So the way it looks like for this now is going to be 1 million divided by 1.1 to the 20th power. And you'll know how much you need today in order to have $1 million 20 years from now. So once again, I'm going to type in 1.1 to the 20th power. And I'm going to so I get 6.727. Got a number of decimals. This is from my international finance class. We do a number of decimals out there for currencies. Nevertheless, 1 million divided by that number means that I'd need $148,000, $643.63 today in order to have that $1 million. So we did some math here, and I get pretty passionate about this particular subject because I understand, and we found this in a lot of the research that I do, experimental research. We found that learning this exponential growth drives savings behavior. And the point I'm trying to make is understanding that my money, if I save it for a long period of time, is going to grow exponentially, not linearly. You go, why is our default linear? And the intuition behind it is our upbringing. We were taught that things grow in straight lines. And my son, who's going into 8th grade, is doing 7th grade math. He says, Dad, we are learning about personal finance in math class. I was like, yes, that's awesome. We need more to do that. I'm like, let's learn about it. And so what are you looking at? Well, let's see the math. Because he needed some help on it. And it was this compounding growth. But you're supposed to calculate it in simple terms is what they call it. Simple terms is linearly. Like, oh my God. You're learning behavior, you're learning personal finance, and you're learning the wrong way. And what was frustrating to me about it is that if you type it up that way, then you're going to completely undershoot your estimates, and you're going to discourage anybody from wanting to invest anything long term. Anyway, let me know. This math that I showed you, do you believe this is way too hard, or you don't know how to use it? I'm entrenched in this subject, and so for me it's very second nature. And whenever I teach it, I do get the sense that people, oh, that's all there is to it. So if you're you want to verify the content that you're watching on Instagram, or somebody talks about growth, well, now you can either validate that or confirm or make up your own numbers. But the exponential growth bias is our tendency to linearize exponential problems. And once again, it leads us to less savings and more debt. And that goes right into what Albert Einstein said. He who understands it earns interest in compounding. He who doesn't pays it. So there's much more that we can do around this. In fact, I've got one more example that I want to show you, just the application of this exponential growth. While we're on the subject, let's talk about expense ratios or expense fees that you get for mutual funds, or mostly mutual funds. There are the biggest things. I went to Fidelity, a discount broker. That's where I used to work, and looked at their flagship. I love the Magellan Fund. That was the big fund. I just got to see what an actively managed fund is paying out for a discount broker, and they're paying 0.52% per year is their expense ratio. And the Magellan Fund is basically an actively managed large cap stock fund. So they're needing to be in stocks, invested in stocks. And so 0.52, this is FMAGX. And then I went and I looked at the Fidelity Zero Total Market Fund. Total Market Fund, this is FZROX. And this is touted as a zero expense. So 0.00. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the same example, and I'm going to ask you, same person starts out with $10,000 when you're 22 years old. Hold the fund for 40 years. Both funds are going to earn an average of 10% per year. One takes off the fund, or takes out the expenses at the end of every year. That's what we can assume in our math. One doesn't. What is your intuitive estimate on how much less will be in your account? So 10,000 as a percentage. Let's just keep this simple as a percentage. How much less will be in your account? Now we have $10,000. We're not going to deposit or withdraw it. We're going to hold it for 40 years, and we're going to earn 10% per year. All right, so we're going to set up the first one. Their Magellan Fund is, the value that we're looking for is 10,000 times 1 plus 0.1 to the 40th power. 1 plus 0.1 minus the expense ratio. So now we're minus 0.0052 to the 40th power. So here, if you're watching this on YouTube, 10,000 times 1 plus 0.1 minus 0.0052 to the 40th power. So I'm going to punch that up and see what we get. 1 plus 0.1 minus 0.0052 to the 40th power times 10,000 gives me 374,000, and I'm just going to round it. $374,448. Okay, let's rerun this now one more time with no expenses. And let me know if there are hidden expenses on this Fidelity Zero. I'm interested. Total Market Fund, it's my assumption that they're not, but they could be doing something with the returns that are kind of compensating for something. I would love to hear from you if you know anything about that. But if we assume that they're not taking anything out, we have 10,000 times 1 plus 0.1 to the 40th power. And I wish I kept that number from before I erased it. But just a good chance to 1.1 to the 40th power times 10,000. I get 452,000. 452,593. A difference of $78,145. $78,145. Or, if we do that as a percentage, it would be approximately 17.27% less. A 0.52, 52 basis points expense ratio over each year, compounded over 40 years, reduces your final amount by 17.27%. Takeaway message: watch those expense ratios. Not sure if I'm willing to have the conversation about or get impassionate or passionate about active investing and beating the market. We're going to talk about a bias that kind of speaks in favor of passive investing, so index investing. And it's always funny because I write in publications about trading strategies, and we're looking at different ways to enhance our returns while minimizing our risks and all these different things. And I have a co-author who I work with at Butler, who I think he's been there. He hired me, so he's been there probably about 10 years longer than I have been, and has a monster track record of papers, and is just a fantastic finance professor. And I call myself the poor man's Dolvin. So, I'm the lesser version. But anyway, he and I write a bunch of papers together, and I finally asked him in his office one day. I said, "Hey, Steve," I said, do you ever use any of these strategies?" And he's like, "No, I passively invest and just allocate and index funds." And I was like, "Oh, good, so do I." That's what I tend to do as well. I own some individual stocks just for fun, but passive investing. So if for nothing else, in favor of this passive investing and index investing is for those lack of expenses, no fees on these mutual funds. All right. Did you think I was going to get on my horse about this for 20 minutes? You don't know me. This will be the one that I will hammer home. Exponential growth. Now, around that as well, piggybacking, there's what we call the amortization bias. So think about owning a mortgage. So I'm a new mortgage owner. That's the only debt I have in my life. And nevertheless, I think about paying off this mortgage, or if you're paying off your student loans now, and you're making minimum monthly payments, you believe that halfway through, so if you have a 30-year mortgage and you think that halfway through your loan, you're going to move. You go, "How much do you think I'll still owe on this house?" Once again, now in the debt domain, we're looking at linear thinking. So if we have a $400,000 loan on the house, we probably think immediately, well, we'll at least owe just about $200,000 on it. And if you're at about 6%, the number is about, you'll owe not 50% of that original balance, it's closer to 72%. So the way these loans amortize is, of course, you pay more interest up front, less principal, and then over time that reverses where you're paying less interest and more principal over the period of your home ownership. But that also means you could, if you're not knocking out your student loans, you're halfway through paying off $100,000 worth of loans. You've been pumping money into that, and you still owe $72,000 if you're getting 6% on your loan. So just more reason to work like crazy to get out of that debt. But what's interesting is our balance is more exponential growth, which kind of goes like this, our original time off. And it doesn't go in the straight line. So our tendency is to think in those linear terms. And this is actually something that we want to know more about or understand better, especially as Americans. We tend to move, on average, anywhere from every 4 to 5 years. And so if we're really playing this role, we have to understand I'm not getting a ton of equity if I'm actually doing that over time, because it's not a linear progress. In fact, if you go 5 years out, you're only making about a 5 to 6% dent out of your original amount. So that's the amortization bias. The next one we're going to talk about is this self-selection bias. So I'm always careful. We can't make broad observations or broad conclusions based on a lot of, when I'm teaching behavioral finance, the people who are in the room aren't necessarily going to be a representation of a broad sample of people. So we have finance majors. The backgrounds are not going to be what we call a representative sample. And what they also do, especially in my behavioral finance class, is that's an elective. And people elect to take this course as one of their finance electives because they find it interesting. We have a good time. It's a lot of fun. And it's not like, so my corporate finance class that I wrapped up last week is a class that everybody has to take. And so there's no self-selection into that. You're just kind of, whether you like it or not, every person at the business school has to take one of these courses, or a corporate finance class. And so you get people who are motivated and ready to get ahead in my summer course, and then you have some who are dreading it and have waited to the last second to take it or either retake it again. But in the behavioral, when everyone has self-selected into it, you can also think that, I just came up with an example here of, you say, everyone is interested in behavioral finance because 100% of my students stated that they love behavioral finance. And so you can make a biased, the sample is biased and is not representative of the overall community. As much as I would like everybody to be 100% loving behavioral finance, self-selection bias. And that's also the reason that I do think the grades are pretty high, because everyone wants to be there, everyone wants to learn. And if I make it interesting enough and engaging enough, then people learn it and they do well. So this nice positive cycle, though, but it's all about their own selection. All right, finally, survivorship bias. Now, this goes back to the conversation that we were going to have on the active manager investing a mutual fund or just the index fund, which doesn't have the expenses around it. Survivorship bias says concentrating or analyzing only on the people or things that made it past some selection process. They made it through some sort of selection process, while overlooking or eliminating from the analysis those who did not. So only analyzing those who have survived whatever particular analysis that is happening. So what we found is mutual funds. There was some reports saying, hey, active investing in mutual funds is the way to go. Look at all these outperformers. A large number, a large percentage of outperformers have outperformed the passive index funds or the market. And upon a little bit further analysis, you found out that they only analyzed mutual funds that had survived the whole time period that was analyzed, which means they eliminated the mutual funds that most likely or presumably performed poorly and went out of business. So of course, only the good mutual funds who outperformed stuck around. Those who did not, they just went out of business, or they renamed it, just kind of make it something else, and then they reset their track record. So survivorship bias, you have to be very, very careful when you're looking at some of these reports or results and understanding, hey, how was the data set, or what was analyzed, and was it manipulated in any way? And so when you've done enough research and you've looked at enough data sets, you understand that this is something that we have to, as researchers, be very trustworthy and just state whatever you find without any shenanigans or trying to pull some of these things that will drive results in different directions. So the one thing that I have taken away, and I feel like this is one of the ways I add value to different committees or board of directors that I'm on, is that through this, if somebody is pitching a financial product, so I was on the board of directors for Portfolio Advisory Committee. I think they're somewhere like $3 billion or something like that. And one of the things that I could bring to that table is if somebody's presenting something, I go, okay, they're really making this case for their product and how well it's done. And so that everyone would smile because I would shoot my hand up. Whenever I shoot the hand up, oh, here we go. What's he going to ask now? What's he asking? And typically what I would try to ask is simply, in the best Midwestern way, is, hey, why, when you were analyzing this, why did you start your analysis at 2010 and go until now? Why didn't you, and how does this product behave in 2007, 2008, 2009? Oh, see how they answer it. Sometimes there's a valid answer for that. They say, well, this product didn't exist until 2011, so that's when we started tracking this against the benchmark. Fair enough. But sometimes if you can kind of sense that they might be withholding some information or they might be cherry picking some of these things, that's when you have to ask, say, hey, did you think about this, or how does it work? Do you have data that goes back? And if so, does it tell the same story, in order to kind of get past somebody trying to pull wool over your eyes? So that kind of is an extension of the survivorship bias, but just making sure that the full data set is analyzed. All right. That, my friends, concludes our topic on heuristics and biases. There are more to talk about, believe it or not, and we will come back to that a little bit later on. I wanted to hit the main highlights that I thought were very important, and then we're going to come back and learn about these biases and heuristics strictly from a financial perspective. So really do a deeper dive into that. I know we touched on it in the last 3 podcasts, but we're going to really fill in those cracks, add some color to some of these, and then we'll move on to our last part of this second section of the course. So if you would be taking the course, we would still have to cover this, the financial ramifications, and overconfidence before taking that second exam. So lots to go over. I hope you're enjoying this content. If you have any questions or if there's anything I can do to serve you, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can leave a comment. You can find me on Instagram. Find me on brianfoltis.com. You would want me to come speak in any of your groups or seminars or congregations, conferences. Do not hesitate to reach out as well. Love to talk about this. Love to teach people about behavioral finance. So thanks again, everybody. Once again, if you haven't done it, please subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Take care.